In a remote corner of France, work is underway on one of the country's most impressive infrastructure projects. A road. But it's not just any old road. It contains France's longest bridge and most beautiful drives. But there's a problem. There's a bit missing. Quite a big bit, in fact, and it's been missing for a very long time.
That's because getting to this point has been far from easy. When we say remote, we don't mean a distant part of Brittany or the coast of Corsica.
No, in fact, once you get to the sun-kissed shores of the Mediterranean, keep going for a very, very, very long way here to the Indian Ocean, where nearly 9,000 kilometers from mainland France, you'll find the island of Réunion. Now, you might be thinking, how on earth do you build a mega project here? And it's a good question because it may be one of the most difficult places in the world to build a road like this. This is what happens when engineering is pushed to its absolute limits, and what it takes to build a mega build in one of the most isolated corners of our planet.
Okay, let's start with a quick politics lesson.
According to Article 1 of the Constitution of the Fifth French Republic, France is a secular, social, and, importantly for us, an indivisible republic.
Which means what exactly?
Well, in other words, France is France, regardless of whether you're here, or even here. So, despite Réunion being closer to the South Pole than to Paris, it's an integral part of the EU and enjoys full representation in the French Parliament. So, why does that matter? Well, it doesn't really, except for prestige, because this means that La Nouvelle Route de Littoral, or New Coastal Road, isn't just one of the most impressive infrastructure projects being built in the Indian Ocean. It's also one of the biggest in France.
Anyway, what's this all about?
Well, as beautiful as Réunion is, the island is dominated by these vast volcanoes. Because of this impossible interior, most towns and cities are dotted around the island's edge. Like this one, Saint-Denis, the island's capital, or this one, Le Port, which contains the island's port. To get between the two, you've got to use this, the Route du Littoral, the old one, that is. Built in 1959, it tightly hugs the sheer cliffs as it passes above the shoreline. About 80,000 vehicles use this road every day, but there's a problem.
Violent winds, rain and waves battered the island.
We have to clear away anything with a large surface area.
That means gusts of up to 200 kilometers an hour.
As vital as this road is, driving it is like being caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. Cyclones in this part of the ocean are common, battering the road with waves and winds of up to 100 miles an hour. And it's not just the road that takes a beating. The elements cause constant erosion to the cliff face, sending rocks and boulders hurtling down onto the road and road users below. On the 24th of March 2006, an entire section of the cliff gave way, sending tons of rock onto the highway below and killing 2 people.
Il faudra probablement une semaine pour déblayer la roche tombée ce matin.
After this tragedy, work began on a better solution. The first job was to study the maximum distance rocks could fall from the cliff and to establish a perimeter that any new road would have to lay beyond. From there, an ambitious solution was proposed. A new coastal road pushed safely offshore. The first part would sit on top of a dike up to 17 meters high and covered in armor to help it resist even a once-in-a-century storm. From there, it would dive into the cliff face and make the final entrance to Saint-Denis through a tunnel. The western section of the route would once again be built on a dike, but instead of disappearing underground, it would rise onto its defining feature, the Grande Chaloupe Viaduct. Stretching for 5.4 kilometers and up to 300 meters away from the shore, it would form the centerpiece of the 12.5 kilometer route, and once complete, would become the longest bridge in France.
Okay, sounds great. Just one thing, let's have another look at Réunion.
As if building one of France's largest infrastructure projects wasn't enough, how do you also do that when the nearest continental landmass is over 1,600 kilometers away?
Well, you have to be pretty self-sufficient. Let's take a look at that bridge.
2 new concrete factories were created on the island to cast the enormous components for the structure. The bridge is a box girder design, meaning the spans are created by joining together a series of precast hollow structures. Inside these boxes are pre-stressed steel cables which squeeze the different sections together. All of that sits on 48 piers, each carefully designed to minimise resistance to the tide and swells of water. The piers were cast here near the western tip of the road. Each structure is made of 2 blocks. The base, 15 metres tall, weighing 4,500 tonnes and featuring a 23-metre wide foundation. On top of that, the pier head, measuring between 9 and 21 metres. To transport these concrete giants to the worksites, a special piece of equipment was needed. Say hello to Zooreet. While everything else for this project was sourced as close as possible, this was the exception. Constructed in Poland, this specially designed barge is the size of a football pitch and contains a concrete mixing facility and gantry capable of lifting the enormous pier sections. One at a time, foundations are sailed out. Once in position, Zooreet, Creole for octopus, plants 8 steel legs into the seabed to provide stability. The foundations are then precisely lowered into place. Once on the sea floor, jacks raise the structure up 40 centimetres, allowing concrete to be injected into sacks beneath the base plate. It took 4 years to install all 48 piers. Once in place, a beam launcher was used to install the box girders. Standing on a pier, it picks up deck pieces and installs them either side on a pier, 2 at a time to maintain balance. It takes a month to complete 2 spans, after which the launcher relocates to the next pier and repeats the process. In 2017, after 4 years of work, the Guadeloupe Viaduct was complete.
But although the bridge may have been the most technically complex part of the road, that isn't what brought the project to a halt. That came with the dike.
These structures were intricately designed to exhaust the power of the sea instead of trying to resist it. Initially, they're created by building up an embankment from the seabed. From there, they're protected by a sophisticated system of armour. The principle is simple. The outer layer is formed of huge cast concrete boulders known as acropods. They take the full force of ocean swells. From there, water is forced through layers of smaller and smaller rocks, creating an increasingly dense maze which zaps the energy from the wave. It's effective, but there's just one thing. It needs a lot of rock. To solve that problem, the project owners proposed opening 2 new quarries, here at Bois Blanc and here at Saint-Lô. These 2 sites would be more than enough to supply the estimated 7 million cubic meters of rock needed to complete the dike. But that's when they ran into trouble. Public backlash against the quarries was intense.
It's what bothers Antonio Cadet and a community group called Don't Touch Our Rocks. They agree the road is necessary, but they're opposed to one of the quarry sites.
Local residents and environmental groups opposed the plans, claiming blasting and heavy truck traffic would disrupt daily life, generate dust and noise, and threaten sensitive ecosystems close to homes and habitats.
With the wind you see here, we're going to have dust everywhere around, and all the people are going to be concerned, especially the children and old people and people with already a disease.
Now, before you roll your eyes, it's important not to underestimate the environmental concerns of this project. Réunion isn't an idyllic island paradise for nothing.
The waters around Réunion are home to impeccable coral reefs, whale migration routes, and dolphin feeding grounds. Part of the reason a bridge was chosen for this stretch of the routes was to minimise the impact on nature, and those concerns over the island's ecology don't stop at the water's edge.
The impact of opening a quarry here would be devastating. And sure enough, in 2018, on the grounds that it would destroy the habitat of several protected species, a court ruled against any new quarry. It was a devastating blow, but it's not the end of the story.
Those giant volcanoes aren't good for nothing. They're also responsible for spraying the island with rocks. So much, in fact, that for years it's been a problem for farmers whose land is littered with basaltic boulders. So, an ingenious solution was found.
Chaque jour, 1000 tonnes d'andins sortent du champ de Jean-Louis Munyama pour alimenter le chantier de la NRL.
Farmers across the island were encouraged to roll boulders off their land to the roadside, where they were picked up and transported to the construction site.
Pour moi, ça me permet de plus tard d'améliorer le terrain, plus travailler un peu mécaniquement. Faire un peu de la canne mécanique, planter d'autres choses, ananas. Avant, je ne pouvais pas planter d'ananas, je ne pouvais pas planter des trucs, des petites cultures. Et maintenant, à fur et à mesure, je vais essayer un peu de tout.
Win-win. Farmers cleared their fields, and millions of tons of rock was collected for the road.
But as elegant as the solution was, it still couldn't provide all the rubble needed for the road's armor. And there was worse to come. In a review, it was discovered the quantity of rock needed had been massively underestimated. Rather than 7 million cubic meters, 12 million were needed to finish the dike.
And with that, in 2019, the project ground to a halt. The team looked into sourcing rock from South Africa, but the cost of shipping it over 2,000 kilometers to Réunion was astronomical. As well as France's longest bridge, the project had also picked up another, less welcome record. With just 8 out of 12.4 kilometers constructed, the cost had skyrocketed to over $2 billion, making it one of the most expensive roads in the world.
That price tag is bitterly ironic. Back in the planning stage, a bridge running the entire length of the route was ruled out because it would be too expensive.
To make matters worse, in 2021, it was discovered nearly 800 aquapods were incorrectly installed. A further 2,500 had to be removed to reposition the faulty blocks at a cost of €20 million. In 2022, the Réunion Council decided to bite the bullet and approved completing the road as a viaduct, potentially adding another €700 million to the final bill. But even that came with complications. Zurich, the specialist barge, had been sailed back to Europe in 2020 after the bridge was complete. Preliminary work on the final stretch began at the end of 2025, and construction on the viaduct is due to begin in 2027, with a completion date now set for 2030. In the meantime, the existing parts of the new road are now in use, albeit with a detour back onto the old road for the missing stretch.
Despite the shortcomings of the new coastal road, Réunion's engineering prowess is not to be underestimated.
For decades, this remote corner of France has been building extraordinary feats of engineering in an environment far more hostile than anywhere in Europe. Projects like the Three Basins Viaduct have shown that this extraordinary island can create infrastructure that's not just practical, but also beautiful.
But out here, when things go wrong, there's nowhere to turn to. Attempting a mega build in such a remote place isn't just about engineering prowess. It's about a drive to succeed against the odds. The story of the new coastal road doesn't detract from Réunion's record, it shows how extraordinary it is in the first place.